Okay, so we're going to start in Xcode using a single view application, making sure that we have application iOS selected. We're going to give this a name, so we're going to call it mapping app. Organisation name is student, that's fine. And remember, we're using the reverse domain prefix for the organisation identifier. So I'm just calling mine Bob, but you should call yours something more relevant to you. Making sure that we're working in Objective-C and also that the devices are set to universal. So this will allow us to develop apps for both iPhone and iPad. So we can press next, choose where we want to save it to. I'm just going to create a new folder on the desktop and call this mapping app, and press create. Okay, so you can see we're given our initial application setup with the name of our identifier at the top, our deployment devices, and also the deployment target. I'm going to change this to version 9 and above. This relates to which version of iOS we're targeting. So if your app happens to feature new functionality which isn't available on lower platforms, then you should always make sure that you go for at least one of the newer ones. You can also specify, do we want to work in portrait, landscape, upside down. For this, again, I think we're just going to do iPhone portrait to save on some of the complications. Okay, you'll also see that by default we have over this side we have our app delegate files, which allow us to do certain things if the application is about to enter the background or if we're about to take a phone call. Don't need to worry about that too much for this tutorial. The main ones we're going to be concentrating on is our view controller H, our view controller M, and our storyboard file for actually creating our graphical layout. So because we're creating a mapping application, what we want to do is add some specific frameworks to allow us to access things like the location services within the device, but also to work with the map kit, which is provided as part of Xcode. So making sure you're in your mapping app general settings, go down to linked frameworks and libraries, and we're going to choose to add the core location. So if you just start typing core, you should see core location is one of the available options. So we're going to add that to our project. So that's the first thing we're going to be working with, but a little bit later on we also want to add to it the map kit framework so that we're able to display our location on a map. So we're going to add the map kit framework as well. Okay, so you should notice these appear not only in your general app settings but also in your list of embedded project files down on the left hand side. Okay, so we've added them to our project, but what we also need to do is to import them into our viewcontroller.h, our header file, so that we can actually work with it. So our existing UI kit is available, so we're going to add or import the map kit and the core location by pressing the Alt and 3 key to reveal the hashtag. And as we start to type the word import, you can see it will prompt us with some pop-ups. So we're going to choose the header contained within the angle brackets. And again, we're just going to start typing core, and it should start to bring up all the core available headers which are in there. So core location / core location.h is our first one. And we're going to do the same again, Alt 3, start typing import to bring in within our angle brackets our map kit framework as well. Okay, so that's allowed us now to bring in the functionality to be able to access the GPS hardware using the co-location, but also to be able to use the inbuilt mapping functionality within using the MapKit framework. So before we start going ahead and actually programming anything in there, we're going to set our view controller to be our delegate. So the delegate will control the co-location and the MapKit. So again, at the side of where it says UI view controller, we're going to open some angle brackets and just start typing the word CL. And you can say straight away, it's recognised we've got co-location in there, so it's saying co-location manager delegate. So we're going to choose that one, comma separate, and we also want to do the MK MapKit view delegate. Okay, so this is just going to allow us to control each of those from our view controller. So I'm going to add some braces, or curly brackets, as I like to call them. And we're going to add to our project a location manager, so we can actually control the location and get the relevant information that we need. So again, I'm going to start typing CL, and you can see a few options have come up. The one we want is location manager. So I'm going to do CL location manager, and I'm just going to name my location manager using the camel case. So the first word of the conjoined words is lowercase, and then the second word starts with capital. And then just to make sure we finish it off properly, I'm going to use a semicolon to say we've finished at the end of that line. And we're also going to add another one, which is going to be the CL location. And I'm going to call this one, using the asterisk, location. So this is going to allow me to pull in that data that I need to access my GPS coordinates. And while I'm here, I'm also going to create a couple of float variables. Remember, float variables are numbers with decimal points. So 1.278, 3.14, 5.793. Those are all examples of float variables. I'm going to type in float, and I'm going to call one of them current lat. Don't forget to close the line off with a semicolon. And I create another one and call this one current long. Okay. So these are going to represent my latitude and longitude variables, which we're going to use for mapping where we are on our map view. Okay, so we've set up our project in terms of the header. So what I want to do now is I want to go into my view controller and start adding some elements to this part so that we can begin grabbing the information. So the very first thing we want to do when the view did load method is called, remember this is only called once when the view is actually loaded. What we're going to do is we're going to activate our location manager. So I'm just going to start typing location manager, and it's recognized the instance that we created. And say equals, open this with a square bracket, and start typing CL location manager alloc, which stands for allocate. So it's going to allocate some resources to it. Close one of the square brackets, and then I'm going to type init, which stands for initialize. And again, close off all my square brackets. Remember, whenever you open one, you always have to close it. So because we opened two square brackets, as we go along, we should see both of those get closed off, and then closed, finalized with a semicolon. So I've initialized my location manager. I also want to initialize my CL location. So again, I start typing location and choose from the drop down, and it's recognized straight away one of the instances we created. So I'm going to initialize this in the same way, two square brackets, CL location, allocate some memory, close one of the square brackets, and then initialize, remembering always to close off any brackets, parentheses or square brackets that we open up. And then finally, I'm going to set the location manager delegate to be the self or itself. So it knows that this implementation, this view controller is controlling the location manager. So we need to set a few permissions in this area. So the first thing we're going to do is request that the location manager asks the user of the iPhone or iPad, whichever device we happen to be using at the time, it requests always in use authorization, or the other option, if we don't want it to be able to be accessed all the time, is again we can bring up the location manager and choose request when in use authorization. So depending what your application is for, you would choose one of those. You could use both, there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't, but it's probably a good idea just to choose the one that you know you're going to use. And then the final stage is to tell the location manager to start updating the location. Okay, so this will fire up the location manager, allocate it some memory, request the user permission, and if the user declines this, then it will prevent the device accessing the location. There's another little bit that we need to add to allow this shortly, but what we'll do, we'll carry on setting up in this screen and then we'll revisit that in a moment. So we've actually fired up the location manager now, so that will run, but what we want to do is to be able to actually change things or control things while that's running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to access one of the built-in methods associated with the location manager. So I'm just going to start typing dash open brackets void, and actually as I start typing location, it's going to give us some prompts, and the one we want is actually the very first one, did update location. Okay, so we're going to choose that method, remembering to use our braces, our curly brackets. So at the minute, because we haven't specified, the location will be updated every second. So what we can do is use this method to either update a variable or to update a map and set our location every time it's updated. So what we're going to do is refer to the instance of our location, which we created back in the header file, and we're going to set this to be, our current location is going to be locations, third one down, which is this array of GPS coordinates, which is updated every time we change a location. I'm going to set it to be the last object within that array. And if you remember back in the header file, we created two variables, current long and current lat. Again, I'm going to set these also to be the location manager equals location manager dot location dot coordinate dot, in this case, latitude. And you'll know if your syntax, your code is correct, you see, with the correct colour coding. If one of these was to be highlighted, underlined, or was showing up as a black font, then you would know you've probably got an issue somewhere. And again, same again, current lon equals location manager dot location dot coordinate, and this time dot longitude. Okay, so that's going to give us a so it's given us initially an error, but it's a fixable error. So if we click on that, it will say undeclared identifier current long. So you'll see when I typed it out, I misspelled it. I forgot to use camel case and put in a capital L. So it's recognised that and it says, I can fix that, and so it has done. So that's good. It's able to check our work as we're going along. So the first thing we're going to do is we just want to log that to the console, just to see if it's actually bringing in current latitude and longitude location. So we're going to do nslog. We're going to create a string at, and then quotation marks, and we're going to say latitude colon. And remember, this is going to be variable. It's not going to be a specific or a specified item. So we need to use a placeholder for a float value, which is represented by %f. And longitude, again, is going to be a variable. So we're going to use the placeholder %f again. Close our quotation marks. And then afterwards, this is where we need to specify each of those variables. We're going to put in current, and again it's recognised as we started typing, current lat, comma, current lon, close our brackets and use the semicolon. Okay. So we're almost ready to start testing. So what we're going to do is, remember we set up our request always use authorizations. One more thing related to that which we need to add within our application plist. Okay, so in order to access the privacy things, we need to specify a new row in here. So we're going to go right click, add row, and we're going to type in ns always usage description, and this is going to ask us to put in a string, and this is what the user will see when the device asks if we can use your location. Obviously this is put in there to stop people creating apps which spy on people unnecessarily. So in order to be able to access any of the information on a device, then the user has to OK that usage. So what we're going to do is simulate this in an iPhone 6S, should be fine, and by pressing play, we should hopefully now see it starts compiling, and it should start to bring together, asking me for my password, just to authorize. Oh, and again. So we start to run this, and it's prompted us, so it said allow the app to use your location. So if we press allow, what that's actually done, if I just move this out of the way, is it's actually the ns log that we created. It's actually started logging our latitude or longitude. It's actually obviously a simulated latitude and longitude because we're not running this on a device, we're running this on the machine. But what it's done is it's fed that information that we've requested back to us. So let's stop that playing back and exit the simulator. So what we can do now is we can actually, rather than just feeding that data back to the console, the user of the app wouldn't be able to see any of that. What we really want to do is set that to be visible on a map, so it actually represents something that a user can take in and actually visualize. So working within our view controller main storyboard, we're going to go to the bottom right and we're going to just type the word map, and this will bring up for us a map view kit. So I'm going to drag that into my project and stretch it out to fill the screen. So this will represent a map view once we test this in the simulator, and we will hook up our user's location to it. So again, just to demonstrate, if we run this again in our simulator, what we should see is a map representation. And again, if I just rotate that to the left so it fits a little bit better, you can see we have a map of the UK on there, but it doesn't update. We can recenter it and we can zoom in and things like that should we want to do, but it doesn't actually allow us to see where we are. We could be anywhere in that map. So we need to link that to our GPS coordinates being obtained from the device. So we're going to go into split view so that we can see both our storyboard and our view controller.h file. And what I want to do is drag off a reference to this map view by holding down Alt, clicking and dragging, sorry, not Alt, holding down Control and clicking and dragging across into my .h file, and then I can see it's saying it's going to add a map view object, and this is where I can give it a name. So I'm just going to keep it simple and descriptive and just call it map view, press connect, and it's created that reference for me in my .h file. So now I can control this user element by referring to it in any script as map view. So I'm going to switch back out into single view mode, the standard editor, and go into my view controller.m. So what I want to do now is I want to control that, and I want to be able to specify and zoom in on the region where our user happens to be. So within the location manager, I'm going to create a location coordinate. So this is going to be a CL location coordinate 2D. Again, you can call this anything you want, but I'm going to call mine zoom location, making sure that you use a semicolon at the end. So the eagle-eyed amongst you will probably notice I've got a little yellow warning here. This is just telling me that I've created a variable or an instance to something, but I haven't actually used it. So that's fine, we haven't got around to that yet, but the reason it flags it is if we create lots of instances or variables that never get used, obviously they take up memory, so where possible we want to try and avoid creating things that never get used. So now we've created this, I'm going to set my zoom location latitude value, and I want it to be the same as current latitude, which is the float variable we obtained earlier back here. And again, zoom location dot longitude equals current longitude, and again that's allowed us to create a coordinate from our current latitude and longitude values. Okay, so what we want to do now is take that zoom location and we're going to make a coordinate region. And this is going to be called view region. So this is going to specify within our map view which particular area we're going to be looking at. And it's going to be based upon the user's location, which, as we know, we've already obtained, so we can use zoom location for that. But also the distance in meters that we want to be zoomed in on. So we're going to go for around 4,000 initially. Again, we can always lower or increase that number if we want to zoom out. Again, another warning saying we've got an unused variable, but that's okay because we're going to use it on the next line. So we've set a view region based upon our current coordinates. So we need to apply this now to our map view. So remember we created a reference allowing us to focus in on or send direct commands to the map view we put on our storyboard, we can now refer to that and we can say set region, and we're going to use the view region that we just created. And what this should do when we test it is position the map based upon our current, or simulated in this sense, location. So let's run that in the simulator and see what we get. So there we go. So our device thinks, for some reason, we are somewhere in California. That's because we set within the simulator our area to be California. What this doesn't tell us, and actually if we adjust the simulated device, what that isn't doing at the minute is filling the whole of this screen, and it's not telling us exactly whereabouts on this road we are. So we need to add a few extra bits to it. So I'm going to stop the simulation and go into my storyboard. One of the things when working in Xcode, particularly when you're designing for multiple devices like iPhone or iPad, is that you have to specify the screen size. So Xcode is quite good in that it will do some of this work for you. So if I select my map view and choose the icon that looks a little bit like a TIE fighter and go add missing constraints, it will now automatically scale this map view to the size of the device we happen to be working on. And I've also got a little option up here which says show user location, which if I enable, what that should do is pinpoint where we are on the map. So let's simulate that again, and you see straight away it's filled our screen, and it's also pinpointed on the location on the map our exact location. So it thinks we're going past Stanford University golf course. Unfortunately we're not, but one day, who knows. So you probably notice as well that when I switch from left to right rotation, it doesn't actually update the map. So if you remember right at the start, we specified that we only wanted our device to work in portrait mode. I might have changed my mind on that. So what we're going to do is go back to landscape left, landscape right, under your app general settings, check those, and this time when we play it back, we should hopefully see that our iPhone, or simulated iPhone, flips whenever we specify a different rotation. So it makes it easier for it to see exactly what we're looking at.